has a center. The center is the Beis Hamikdash and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And that's where the Shekhinah rests. It's like the brain of a person. And it gives life to the whole world. The same is true. Each world, Atzilus center is, he calls it Shekhinah, it's the Beis Hamikdash. And the same is true Bria, the same is true Yitzira, the same is true Asiya. In the context of our Maimed, the Beis Hamikdash, or the brain, is called the Amud, the beam. It holds up the house. And the direction that we're headed in is to make the following point, that the beam has a body and has a hollow inside. The beam itself is the Ma'aseh mitzvah, the action of the mitzvah, which justifies the building of the whole house. And the hollow inside represents the Kavonas HaMitzvah. Because this is where we're headed. So let's do the last couple of questions, okay? 71 we did, and as much as mitzvahs are concerned, what is the hall and what is the column? The hall would be the action and the column would be the kavana. 72, more particularly, the beams themselves have an inner and outer dimension. In Hebrew it's called pnimis achitzenis. Of these beams, pnimis achitzenis of these beams, please tell me, it's a bit like a kohen, yes. What each of these two represent. The body of the beam is the Ma'aseh HaMitzvah. The hollow inside the beam is the Kavanas HaMitzvah. Right. So before, because in the Maimed he says that about the Heichal versus Amud. And then he refines it, or we're refining it, the outer Amud versus the inner Amud. In the Maimed he divides it up as the Heichal being the Ma'aseh. At least that's how I understood it. 73. What is the ultimate point being made here about the beams, particularly the pneumius of the Amud? The answer is that in this Maimer, in contrast to what we would consider typical in Chassidus, the Kavana is considered more important than the Ma'aseh. The intent, the meaning behind the mitzvah is higher than the action itself. I mean, classically, in Chassidus, especially in Chassidus Chabad, the most important thing is the action. In this Maimed, there seems to be this notion that there's a mila in the pneumius over the chitzenis. The kavana has an advantage over the ma'aseh. And I mentioned this to you in class. That one of the interesting ideas that you have in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya talks about mitzvahs, right? Chapters 35, 36, 37 talk about mitzvahs. When you get to chapter 38, Alter Rebbe introduces us to a very important idea, which is very famous actually. And that idea is mitzvah b'lei kavana k'guf b'lei neshama. A mitzvah done without kavana is like a body without a soul. So the neshama, right. So here's the way it plays out. Mitzvah b'lei kavana k'guf b'lei neshama would mean this: if I did a mitzvah no kavana, I have a dead body. Yeah. If I have a kavana without a mitzvah, I have nothing. Because spirituality in the physical world is a non-entity. It's not existent. So the Ma'aseh HaMitzvah gives you a body. The Kavanas HaMitzvah makes that body living. So the Ma'aseh is more important, but the Kavanah is also very important. But the Alter Rebbe has one more kvetch, which is extremely important and frequently overlooked. The Alter Rebbe talks about Kavanah and adds one very important detail. The Kavanah is also a mitzvah. The Eibishter wants the Kavanah. If the kavanah was for me, so I should feel the meaning of a mitzvah. So okay, you have to have a mindset or the Eibishter wants. You have to have a kavanah, so you should be motivated to do it. But since the kavanah is part of the Eibishter's ratzon, in its own way, it becomes a part of the mitzvah itself. So although the kavanah is like the neshama and the mitzvah is like the guf, and a dead mitzvah is better than a metaphysical mitzvah, because on the physical world it doesn't exist, but the kavanah is still extremely important because Eibishter wanted it. You're saying
that if the kavana itself is a mitzvah, then why do you then the ma'aseh is not actually a kavana it's its own mitzvah, which is its body, and the kavana which is the guf.
Because the kavana is the neshama of the guf. In other words, what would be an example of a mitzvah which is entirely kavana? Emunas Hashem, maybe. Amunas Hashem, Avos Hashem. It's also a big debatable, but let's say maybe, yeah? So in that case, you would be right.
What about tefillin, where it specifically tells you to have a specific kavanah?
By tefillin, the halacha is
Right?
there's 3 mitzvahs. Tefillin, tzitzis, and sukkah. That if you don't have the kavanah, you didn't do the mitzvah. Because the time is in the chumash. It's in the chumash. Laman yedu de'deseichem. The Alter Rebbe has a whole seminary in Shulchan Aruch, Daf Resh Chaf Hei, which is about the kavanah of sukkah. Why? Because in the case of sukkah, the kavanah is connected to the mitzvah directly. Okay, and there's a Rebbe brings a bach always about this. It's a lumdis. Point well taken. How to fit this into our conversation at the moment, I don't know. But I'm not going to explore it for 2 reasons. A, it's not important to us right now. B, I'm personally not qualified at this particular moment. Yishai Ezriel Shlita. Please pass this to him. Chaim Shnei Zalman, huh? He's a wonderful guy. He's such an amazing person. He has such advantages and such grace and milas. Okay, 74. In the class, I discussed 2 perspectives on the interface between Maisa and Mitzvah. What is the classic perspective? The classic perspective is that mitzvahs are more important than the kavanah. The Eibishter wants the mitzvah. And you mentioned tefillin. It's one of the few exceptions where the kavanah plays a more direct role of the kiyum mitzvah. But beklal, when it comes to mitzvahs, if a person meditates on matzahs for 100 years and doesn't eat a kazayis matzah, he didn't do the mitzvah. If a person ate a kazayis matzah, he didn't have kavanah, he's mekayim the mitzvah. Why? He ate the matzah. And the Gemara says, and he tasted the matzah. It's an interesting thing. We had it in yesterday's Rambam. The Rambam holds that you have to do things with kavanah. The Rambam holds that you do things with kavanah, yeah? If you do something without kavanah, you didn't do the mitzvah, and in yesterday's Rambam, you didn't do the Aveda. But if a person did something as a Meshasek, he had no intention of doing it, but it gave him pleasure, Shekei Nehene, he had pleasure. A person ate matzah, had no idea that it was Pesach, no idea it was matzah, but he enjoyed it. Halachically, that becomes the kavanah. So even though the Rambam holds mitzvah stricha, we don't pass like the Rambam. The Rambam holds mitzvah stricha's kavanah. When you do a mitzvah, you have to have a kavanah. Those mitzvahs, and in yesterday's Rambam was talking about an aveda, that you do as a mesasek, you have no, what's the word? Proactive intent. It just sort of happens by mistake. If you had a pleasure from it, the pleasure becomes the kavanah. Anyway, this is an aside. I'm bringing it up because it happened to be in yesterday's Rambam for those who learn Shlosh B'Lakim Layim. But what's negay is that classic. You see, the kavanah is secondary. The kavanah gives meaning to the mitzvah, but the Eibishter wants the mitzvah, right? The whole dira b'tachtonim idea, the gashmis has atzmos in it, and so forth. Question 75, what is the perspective of this maim? This maim is focusing on the mile of kavanah. Why? It's pnimius. And the kid,
73 is kavanah sticker, 74 is action sticker, and 75 is kavanah sticker.
Yeah, if there's repetition, forgive me. What is the ultimate point being made here about the beams? Particularly the beams. That 73 is that there's idea of kavanah, right? 74 is that mice is the most important. And 75 is that kavanah is the most important. Now, in Tanya chapter 38, some insights can be found to help resolve this. What does it say there? The answer to question 76 is, chavra, that the kavanah is part of the mitzvah. That the Eibishter wants the kavanah. That's what I told you in class. That even though it's still always going to be true, that the Maisa mitzvah is more important than the Kiyum mitzvah, the kavanah mitzvah, but since the kavanah is part of the Ratzah of the Eibishter said, do a mitzvah with kavanah, so the kavanah is not just something you're doing that you should feel right about doing it, you should feel good about doing it. It's part of what the Eibishter wants. So it brings it closer to the Ratzah of the Eibishter. And finally, 77. How does this connect to the 4 levels of Doimim, Tzemeach, Chaim? This is part of the review of Tanya chapter 38. I sometimes do this, I throw in extra subjects. It took us a whole week to review one class because we added a bunch of stuff, The Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya chapter 38 that Doimim means doing a mitzvah with action. Tzemeach means doing a mitzvah with speech, dibur. Chai means doing a mitzvah with kavanah based on your nature, expressing your emotions of your nature. And medaber means doing a mitzvah with expressing emotions that come from your brain. In Aramaic, it calls it dechilu, dechimu tivim, fear and love of Hashem, which is from your nature, from your personality, versus dechilu, dechimu sichliim, fear and love of the Eibishter, which comes from your intellect. Okay?
So Chai is natural.
So Chai is midas, it's emotions, but it's just expressing your personality. As they say in American, I can't help it, that's my nature. And Medaber is, I can help it, I can change my nature. And I can use my mind to develop emotions that may go against my nature even.
So is it both of them is brain, or one of them is...
Both of them are kavana, brain and heart. But one of them is brain and heart that activates your personality, and the other one can go against your personality.
So one is just regular emotion and the other one's seichel.
Is seichel emotion. Seichel-based emotion. Seichel-based emotion. Imagine making yourself excited about something that naturally you don't like.
So you're forcing yourself to...
Well, you're educating yourself. You can't force it. You can force yourself to eat pizza or to not eat pizza. You can't force yourself to feel. It's an incredible piece of work. It's a very high level. It's madrega, big tzaddik, that's tamazoi. For a person to use his brain to activate feelings which are against his nature, because the Abish said to do so, is unbelievable. It's a very high level. Okay, so now it's 8:57. You're all finished? Take a look at the page. 673, the last line, huh? Say that again. Oh, that doimim is ma'isa mitzvahs. That semeach is mitzvahs that do with dibur, like benching and learning Torah and davening and saying brachas. Semeach is developing love, feelings for the Eibishter, but feelings based on your personality. And medaber is feelings that they based on the development of the Eibishter, which is based on your brain, not on your personality. Okay? Now, go back to your texts, please. I'm not going to keep you here long. I just want to show you one line. The last line of the second to the last paragraph of page 673 reads, V'chein hugam b'Torah. We just spent the whole page talking about architecture. We got lessons in architecture from the biggest Amaret's architecture that ever lived. And what we learned about is the importance of columns, beams. And we somehow figured out that these columns could still hold up the whole house, even though they're hollow on the inside. The beam is the mace and the hollow is the mikavon. It says, this division exists in Torah as well. In other words, there's the world. The world, that's the whole. Then there's the purpose of the world, Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit exists in mitzvahs on an inside level, kavana, on an outside level, maaseh. Says the Rebbe, the same is true in Torah. V'chein ugam b'Torah, she'ikir hamud Torah. The primary beam of Torah, ein egalia the Torah, is not the revealed Torah. Pnima is a Torah, the face of Torah, the inner Torah. Meaning, just like in mitzvahs there's a maaseh and a kavana, in Torah is also a chitzenius and a pnimis. Chitzenius is a Torah which means nigla, and pnimis is a Torah which means nisted. And in the mush of the beam, nigla is like the beam itself, and nisted is like the hollow inside the beam. Or as we started yesterday's class, a beam is a physical thing. And we use the mushal of a ray of light shining from heaven to earth to pluck something up from the top down. We use the same word, amud. So there's the chitzonius of the amud, which is nigla de Torah, and there's the pnimius amud, which is nista Torah. Now, why are we learning this? Because this maimed is lahavin inyan hilula de rashbi. It's at the B'shim B'Yachai. And the B'shim B'Yachai is the father of Pnimi. I need your attention. The B'shim B'Yachai, I have tough competition. The B'shim B'Yachai is the father of Pnimi Satera. So we juxtapose, we interface Chitzonius and Pnimius in mitzvahs, Ma'aseh and Kavanah. We apply that to Chitzonius and Pnimius in Torah to explain the difference in the personality of Rab Shimon from his friends. And explaining the difference in personality between Rab Shimon and his friends, we can answer the question with which our Maimon began. What is the significance of Shimon passing away, making it into a yontif? So this whole digression is getting back to this. In other words, believe it or not, I went through this page in a hurry. Now, a hurry took us 2 weeks. But for us, that's quick, especially considering how much new information we had. We did 2 paragraphs for a relatively short amount of time. And the reason I did it quickly is because I wanted to teach it to you, but I didn't want to get stuck on it. Now we're going back to the point of this Maimer, like Ba'omer and Reb Shem B'Yachai. Okay, and we'll do this in Mitzvah Hashem next week. Now wait. Sunday there's no yeshiva. Monday and Tuesday is Shavuos. Wednesday is no yeshiva. When is Six Flags?
Next week.
Next
the week
Monday.
after.
The Monday after.
Yeah.
So in other words, the next time I see you will either be Sunday after Sunday.
Thursday.
The Sunday after next, there's no yeshiva.
Thursday's not sponsored.
Thursday this class?
Thursday is not this class. That's all.